Hey everyone, my name is Brad V. Lewis with United Financial Advisors. I'm a financial advisor here, and today I have on our podcast Argie Nichols. She's a wife, proud Grammy, and a lifelong educator, and got a guide to building a legacy that lives far beyond your bank account and job titles. With over 45 years of education, leadership, and entrepreneurship. She's led award-winning programs, inspired global audiences, and mentored thousands of women and students to rise to their potential. But at this stage in life, she knows the truest success isn't measured in resumes, it's found in relationships, wisdom shared, and peace passed on. Whew. Okay.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It,
Thank you, Brad.
yeah.
So I'm very excited to be here today because I'm very passionate about helping women and talking about leaving a legacy. And when I say that, I don't think women understand exactly what I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about what legacy is today briefly. I mean, it's more than just when you pass away, you leave your jewels and your money to your kids, your grandkids, or your great grandkids. It's just so much more than that. Yes, financial is a part of it, but so much more. So, Brad, how would you define legacy?
Yeah, well, I probably define it, a little bit differently than you, just because I deal with the financial side uh, of everything with clients. And but I do describe it more broadly. It's not just the things you leave behind, but also the ideas that you leave behind, the people that you touch, and the people that their lives touch. So having some sort of generational planning, goes beyond just how to pass on wealth or how to pass on jewelry or some type of heirloom, but it also goes to how people treat each other and
Mm,
what that means for the next generation going forward.
absolutely. So, what I say is that legacy is not something that you leave behind. Legacy is something that you live every day, and how you document that and share your life with other people. And a big part of that is kindness. So, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, Brad. Not much, just a
What?
little, okay?
Really?
I'm just saying, just a little. So I have actually finally retired from 45 years of lecturing in the classroom and making presentations to board rooms and speaking at conferences and those types of things. But I have to be very truthful here. My greatest lesson didn't come from the degrees or all the plaques and things you see hanging behind me. It actually came from loss, the grief with that loss, faith, and just a quiet reckoning that happened when my brother passed away about a year and a half ago. We both left very long, successful careers, but I'm going to be honest with you. When I lost my brother, I had to say, what now? What am I going to do? Am I going to retire and just sit in the recliner and kick my feet up? Well, I did
I-
that for a little while.
it surprises me that you did that at all. You don't strike me as someone who could sit still for very long.
I'm not. And, I think my brother spoke to me from the other side of the world where he is now. And he said, Sis, what are you doing? You're wasting away. You're not done. Get up and go help women leave their legacy. And I was like, okay, I see your point. Because he and I have been through, a lot of stuff with family issues, and there's some unpeaceful things, unsettled things in our family, and I think it would just be wonderful to get those things settled. So, I call that space between thinking about retiring and being retired and figuring out what you're gonna do, I call that the legacy gap, and there's a lot of us out there either about to venture into that gap or we're already there. And Brad, you're a long way from this gap. But you know what? It's you can be thinking about some of this stuff too.
Yes. Sorry,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Whenever whenever we go through, I mean, we go through this gap with clients because there's also a monetary
Yes.
transition. Social Security can start anywhere between 62 or 70, and so some people have a weird transitionary period. And you have Medicare that starts at 65, and so not all these things one start at the same time. It also makes sense for some people to delay their Social Security, but they might retire before 62. And so there's also a weird transitionary period where you might have to pull more from accounts, or some people will work a part-time job, they'll start a side business to add a little bit of income to make up between whenever they retire and then the actual transition of having Social Security come in, or having Medicare and cheaper healthcare. So all those things work in the same way.
Yeah, I wanna tell you that was a major, major concern when I was running all these scenarios through my mind, and the first thing I did was call you and your dad at United Financials, and I said, "I'm thinking about it, I'm in the gap," and thank goodness y'all stepped up and helped me ease right on through that gap, and then, of course, while I was going through that gap is when I lost my brother, and grief can do a lot of things to you know? But we all have our ways of getting through grief, and I think the awakening in me was, I know I'm not the only woman out there asking questions. I know I'm not the only woman that needs to get in touch with you, Brad, to work out this Social Security, Medicare issues. And I'm going to tell you, there's lots of questions around that. And thank goodness you guys were there to straighten me out. How I appreciate that. And that also goes along with the emotional side of things. Am I gonna be eating cat food after I retire, or am I capable to afford food?
I actually had a client ask me with a very well put together nest egg, and they asked me, am I going to need to work at McDonald's?"
Yeah.
I said, "No, you're not going to need to work at McDonald's. You have plenty to where if you retire today, you could at least make it. But if you retire in the next couple of years, your life you might actually have more money on a month to month basis than you have while you're working right now." And so just to see that ease and peace, you could see their body language start to relax. Someone telling them that it's gonna be okay.
Well, you know what? There are so many people out there that they may never admit that they have these questions, but by gollies, they're thinking them just like I did. That's why I'm gonna put a little plug in here. United Financial is on my advisory board for my life legacy, and that's exactly what you guys do is you answer those questions, not just for your clients, but my clients that I send to you. It's kind of like this big old peace cloud just falls down on your head once y'all start answering those questions, so you are very appreciated from my side of things. So let's talk a little bit about things like wills and trusts and LLCs and healthcare directives and those types of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, absolutely. Have you gone through and done your own planning?
I sure have. I have set up a
Okay,
trust. Yes.
okay, good, good. Do you have a little lockbox where you keep it all for your family?
I most certainly do. And not only do I have a protective copy, the person that I named as my executor that's going to take care of things and make sure my wishes are carried out has a copy. And then my attorney that prepared the document for me has a copy. So we're pretty covered.
Okay, good. I think what a lot of people, whenever I first mention wills and trusts, their question is, okay, what's the difference?
Yeah.
What is the difference between a will and a trust? So they're both documents. One is a document of basically how you want your will to be carried out, your will. And this is a public process. You have your will, and it'll get read and taken to probate after your passing. And so it'll go through the probate process, which is generally at least 8 months, because you have to have time for creditors to say if there's any need for them to take back from debts on onto your estate. And then the difference is a trust will actually create a different legal entity. So whenever you're creating a trust, it is very similar to kind of LLCs. But whenever you create a trust, you're creating your own entity. Now there is also different. There's tons of different types of trusts that we
Mhm.
won't quite get into here. But a living trust is the most common by far, and a living trust it could be between two spouses. So, um, a living trust could have both of them, and then assets will be put inside of the trust to avoid probate. So where we see trusts becoming really necessary, and whenever I'm in a client meeting and someone asks me about wills or trusts, if there's land, especially if there's land spread out between different states, so each state has their own probate process. So what you don't want is, say you have land in 3 different states, you don't wanna go through 3 different probate processes.
Mm-mm.
Attorneys will generally charge a percentage of the assets that go through probate, and there could also be additional legal expenses and filing expenses. And on top of all that, you really don't wanna have to go to multiple probate hearings and have multiple 8-month to 2, 3, 4, 5-year long processes, or even longer in some cases. So a trust makes that private. They are more expensive to set up. So, if you go to an attorney, a will is gonna be significantly cheaper. But I worked at an elder law attorney's office before I was an advisor, and there was a really stark difference, between the people that came in and all that they had was a will, and the people that came in and their family had set up a trust. So especially if there is land and hard assets, setting up a trust can be really, really necessary to avoid that probate process. There are some ways to avoid probate without a trust. So setting up transfer on death on your investment accounts, setting up payable on death on your bank accounts, beneficiary deeds on some of your land, on some of your houses can directly pass probate, and it'll go directly to your heirs or whoever you set up as your beneficiary. But it's a way, if you get too many moving pieces and you have businesses, you have land, you have buildings, then you really need to set up a trust.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, my advice to my clients is I wanna help you avoid probate any way I can because I'm gonna tell you in the state of Arkansas alone, the probate system is about a year and 2 months behind schedule because of there's so many. And then there's also that fact that, you have to pay an attorney to go with you. You can't just appear yourself in front of a probate judge and say, "I'm here for my settlement." Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You have to hire an attorney, so there's an expense. And then, like you said, there is a percentage of, the value of that land or whatever that will go back to the state. And so you're kind of throwing your ducks out with the bathwater when you if you don't take responsibility and set up a trust. So I highly, highly recommend it. Now, when would I ever recommend someone doing just a will? Well, let's say, Brad, since you're so young and you probably maybe have not acquired land yet, and
Yeah,
maybe you're not married and you don't have children yet.
all these things are.
But let's say you have yeah, a super duper car that you have worked really hard to pay off. And let's say by chance God decides to call you home and you want your little sister to have that car. Now that might not be true at all, but you know what I'm saying. It's nice at your age to have a directive that your parents can follow, whomever you want to have that fancy dancy car. And let's say by chance you had children and going home, you and your spouse are going home from work one night and you have a car accident and you're both killed in the car accident. Sad situation, but now you have a young child at home. Who do you want to take care of that child? I'm gonna guess you don't want that child going into foster care for sure, but you need to avoid the court system at all cost and have a directive there for who will take care of that child in case there is a catastrophe or something that happens to you. So, other than that, do the trust. And in the scheme of things, depending on how much value is in your assets, it's much, much cheaper to do that trust and set it up correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're dealing with a large portfolio, you see a lot of retirees, and the moment that you retire is for a lot of people the most amount of assets that they'll ever own because they spent all their life accumulating everything, and now it's time to start distributing. But at that moment, there's a lot of loss that can happen if the state or an attorney is taking percentage of the assets in probate. Well, say it's 5%. 5% can add up to be quite a bit. 5%,
Yes.
10%. I mean, you're not talking chump change. It could be thousands and thousands upon thousands of dollars. Um, Sometimes tens or hundreds.
Hmm.
It totally depends on the person and the individual. Yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was power of attorneys and the
Oh,
importance of
yeah.
power of attorneys.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, really, even someone my age, you know, having some sort of directive of how you're taken care of while you're in the hospital, um, and if you're unable to act yourself, who's going to take care of your rent or your mortgage? Who's going to take care of your car payment? Who's going to make sure the lights stay on? If no one has access to any of your accounts and you're comatose, no one can get access. It's just kind of in limbo. And then also, if you have a specific want, or I don't want to get, I want to have the ability to have someone turn off the life support at some point. You need to have that written down,
Hmm.
especially if it's different than whatever the state, in our case, Arkansas, but it could be, whatever state you're in. Each state will have their own directive if you don't have your specific directive.
And all of that comes with this trust that we're talking about setting up. There's a bunch of moving parts and pieces, and your medical power of attorney, your financial power of attorney. There's just so many things that fall into place with that trust, and it's kind of like a big old umbrella over the top of you, protecting you from a rainy day. But there's a few more things that I want to mention too. And then I'm going to give you some real live examples. I had a teacher friend who was in a second marriage. Now, she'd been in this second marriage for 35 to 40 years, but her husband took out a life insurance policy many, many years ago, and he still had his first wife's name on the policy. He also still had his first wife's name on there. Now, when he passed, his current wife lost everything, everything. The life insurance policy went to the first wife, the house and all the contents went to the first wife, and they'd been divorced for years. So, little bitty things like that can just really bite you really quick. And let me throw out something else. So, let's say you have credit cards, you have a lockbox, you have all kinds of passwords, usernames and passwords. I know I do. I've got accounts all over the place for different things, like the telephone, my cell bill, satellite, whatever I have, has to have a username and a password. But if I'm gone, who's going to know what that is? Who's going to be able to get into that? And if I haven't taken care of this in my trust, and even if I have taken care of this in my trust and I kind of didn't tell that, I forgot to tell the bank that if something happens to me, I want my husband to have the money out of my bank account, they will not release it, trust or no trust. So you gotta make sure you have payable on deaths, and you mentioned some of that too, but there's just so many little things that you need to take into consideration, and if you're a woman, here's what I'm gonna say to you, or a man, either way. make darn sure that your name is on the utility bills. And why is that important? I'm going to give you a real life example. My husband lost a very dear cousin, very close to him, and he was in a second marriage, and he had not put his current wife's name on the water bill or the electric bill. And when he passed, he had taken care of all the bills and everything through the whole marriage. She knew that the water came on and she knew that the electric came on, but she wasn't connected in any way. Before she went to his funeral, the water got turned off and the electric got turned off because the bills were due. And stuff like that just breaks my heart. Just seriously breaks my heart. You're going through the grief of having to bury your husband, and then your utilities get turned off. It took her about 3 or 4 days to actually pull together enough information to go down and get her electric and water back on. And people
Right.
shouldn't have to do that.
That
Um,
is the unfortunate part about almost everything that we're talking about here is that it doesn't happen. These systems aren't giving you a couple of weeks to grieve your spouse, your kid, your mom, your dad. You're not given a couple of weeks to grieve, and then these things hit. Almost all of them become immediate issues within the
mhm.
first week. Um, so while you're trying to plan a funeral, while you're trying to talk to family, while you're trying to just grieve on your own, you know,
Yeah.
the electric bill, the utility bills, like just like what you talked about, or you can't get access to the bank account, or all the investment accounts are locked up, or now you're told that you're going to have to go through a probate process. And the other thing about the probate process is that if it's backed up a year or more, and it just means that yours doesn't start for a year, and then you started after that, and then it takes a minimum of 8 months, or probably even longer than
Mhm.
that. You can't
Yep.
touch the accounts because they're not yours. Even if you're named in the will, it doesn't pass to you immediately. There's a transitionary period. And if that transitionary period is really long and you have bills to pay,
Yep. So now let's talk a little bit. This was the good, bad, and the ugly. So let's talk a little bit about the neat things that you still probably haven't thought about leaving in your legacy. And one of my favorite things to talk about is my grandmother's recipes. That lady was a fabulous cook, fabulous. And she didn't really write down, she just kind of, oh, a pinch of this and a pinch of that. Well, we finally talked her into writing down a recipe that she made this fabulous candy, and we my brother and I watched her many, many times make this candy, but we didn't write the recipe down, and before he passed, we were beating our heads together trying to figure out exactly what pinch of what she put in there to make that candy, and to this day, I still can't make the candy. I mean, I can get close, but it's not Granny's recipe. So, little things like recipes, photographs, and for goodness sakes, if you still have a box of the old paper printed photographs, write on the back of them because we kids don't know who those people are or why you even have that picture in the box. And, today's technology world, you can have digital photos. We still don't know who they are if you don't, tell us somehow. But think about how you would like to have all those things passed down because that's part of your legacy. Your recipes, your letters. If you have a falling out, let's say you had a falling out with a child and you haven't spoken in 10 or 15 years, for goodness sake, you're not gonna live forever. So I have what I call a legacy letter that you can write to that child and explain, say whatever you wanna say. You don't have to mail it to them. They can find it after you pass away. But it's kinda important to have closure on some of those things. And in my case, it's really important to have my grandmother's recipes. So, yeah, little things like that that we don't think about.
yeah, absolutely. And Archie, do you talk about these things with your family? Do you have dialogue, and how does that look for you specifically?
I would say that, up until my brother's passing, he and I talked about a lot of things. As a matter of fact, um, I was almost 50 years old before I found out that I had Cherokee blood, and my brother didn't know it at all. And he's like, "So, sis, how'd you find this out?" I said, one of those me and 23 things that popped
Yeah,
up that we had Indian
me,
blood." And I'm like,
23andMe.
"Yeah." So I go to my grandfather, who was still living at the time. This could have been in my 40s, I can't remember. But we were out walking on the ranch one day, and we often did that. That's how we were really close. And he said, "Sis, whatever you do, I want you to protect this little plot of land right over here." And I'm like, "Okay, why?" He said, "That's where our ancestors are buried." And I'm looking at him going, "What ancestors?" He said, the Indian side." And I did a double take, and I'm like, "What Indians? I didn't know we had Indians." He said, "Yeah, your grandmother," or well, it would have been my great-great-grandmother, "was full-blood Cherokee." And I'm like, "And you're just now getting around to telling me this?" He said, "Well, it was taboo back in the day. We didn't want anyone to know that we were Cherokee." And I get that. But, those things are important to share, and if you wanna wait till you die, that's on you, but I have never been so proud to be a Cherokee Indian. Now, I'm half Cherokee and half Irish, so you can imagine what goes on there in this little brain up here. But, I don't want other women to get in their legacy gap and find out they're Cherokee, you know what I'm saying? Or find out anything. So it's just important to be open. And like I said, legacy has nothing to do, well, maybe as much to do with after you pass as it does your day to day life. I mean, after you pass, someone else is going to be telling your story, and you sure as the heck hope they tell it correctly. Well, in my case, I don't trust anybody in my family to tell mine correctly, so I'm going to put it out there before I pass so everybody knows that I am Cherokee. So,
Absolutely. And Argie, have you ever heard of the book What the Rockefellers Do?
no, I don't think I have.
It's an
Do I
interesting
need
it's an interesting book. Yeah, you should write it down. I think you'd like it. It talks about exactly what you just described. Basically the whole idea about what the Rockefellers do. I don't agree with everything in the book. It's coming from another financial advisor that has a little bit different views from me, but I like the general idea. And
Mhm.
his thought is, take advantage of compound interest and let it compound over the course of, several lifetimes. But also write in the trust what the family values are and what the family history is, and
Yeah,
give more than just money, and give them incentives to get, whether that be education, or first time home purchases to purchase land, or also to give to specific charities, or maybe not specific charities, but specific
yeah,
ideas. For example, polio might be really important to you. That's just something right. Or domestic violence. You can support specific charity, and you can write that into your documents. And so that was one of the things that book talked about that really resonated with me, as well as kind of the idea of people always putting into the trust.
mhm,
So you had money going in and not just money coming out. And then also
yeah,
you can put in trust documents what the money can be used for. You don't just have to give someone a blank check with everything that you had. You can say, I want this to be used for education. I want this to be used in part for charity. I want it to be used for the next generation. Or you can specify certain uses. Now that it does make things more complicated, and not every state will allow what's called perpetual trust. So you can't just stick a dollar in a trust and let it grow for 500 years. But there are some opportunities to take advantage of compound interest over the course of several lifetimes, and really provide for a family. Maybe not just letting them spend everything. And that's why the book is called What the Rockefellers Do, because the Rockefellers are still rich. But the
yes,
Vanderbilts, there's only one. there's only one millionaire left in the Vanderbilts, and they were a self-made millionaire. I think I don't remember exactly who they were, but it had nothing to do with the generational wealth because they just spent it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
They were spenders, and it never refunded the trust. So just different ways to think about how to build generational wealth, not just for spending, but also, don't get too caught up. If that's important to you, do it, but don't do it for the sake of doing it. If you don't fly first class, then someone else will.
True.
Yeah,
Somebody's gonna fill that seat. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely also a lot of retirees that don't necessarily find generational wealth important, but also don't spend the money that they've saved. So you kind of have like
Yeah.
a kind of dichotomy there where it's not, it's their actions and their belief aren't lining up. Um,
Right.
it's just
Gr
because it's hard.
sometimes sometimes greed gets in the way.
Yeah, yeah. You like to see the big number on your bank account. You like to
Yeah,
see that account value go down. It's hard. It's hard. Especially after
absolutely.
all you've been doing your entire life is saving and building and saving and building, and now someone tells you to spend.
Yeah. So I'll just close my part out with saying that because your story isn't over, it's now becoming your legacy. So don't let somebody else tell your story. You tell it. And if you need help, I am here to walk right beside you, holding your hand, helping you with those legacy letters, helping however. And if it involves financial stuff, I'm going to send you to Brad. Okay. Because I'm not a financial investor person. He takes care of mine. So I highly recommend him. And I have other advisors that work with me, attorneys and different CPAs and things like that. So, and if you want more information, you can find me on herlifelegacy.com.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Cool, Randy. And the same goes, if you're writing a letter, I'm probably going to send you to Argie. But if you want to learn more about your specific case and your specific plan on how you want to create your financial legacy for the next generation, ufadvisors.net is where you'll find more information about us. And then I'll also link a place to put on my calendar on here as well. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for being
Well,
on, Argie.
yeah, Brad, thank you for the invitation. It's been an honor to have a little chit chat with you.
Absolutely.
I guess we'll sign off for now and we'll see you the next time around. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth.